It is State Senator District 40, Angela Hill. Good morning, ma'am. How are you?
Good morning. I'm fine. How are you?
10 o'clock is when the battle begins again. Just take a side step on this one. The flavor, the environment, and everything else, I don't know if people were expecting it to be as costly as it is, but boy, tempers are just, and tension is just ramped up in the House and the Senate. And your overview as a member of the Senate for a while now, just your thoughts on this. What's going on, and will it get any better?
Well, I don't know. I mean, listen to some of these people talk, you would still think that we were in the 1960s, not 2023. So, I can't say whether or not.
When you say these people, you're talking about the Democrats, or?
Yes, basically, when people get accused of, wearing their white hoods, and, when everything that you do, every piece of policy devolves into racism and, charges of being discriminated against. It doesn't matter what policy you're talking about. That's where it always winds up. I mean, you can be talking about what flavor of ice cream.
Has the leadership of the Senate tried to, or the House for that matter, tried to build a coalition, understanding everybody could have predicted this anytime you encroach?
They absolutely have tried to build a coalition. Over the years, I've watched them try to work with the Democrats. Sometimes I've watched them go overboard, in my opinion. But it doesn't change the fact that it comes right back to the same talk that always comes up.
I think I heard maybe it was from John Horn who said this yesterday. It may have been John or our good friend Representative Johnson from Natchez say that when the coalition was there, or when the agreement was there, that we do need some help. It wasn't this extensive, and this feels like a takeover of the capital city. Well,
people want to be safe, and they've seen what the Capitol Police have done. And the vast majority of people, even the residents of Jackson that I see and talk to, are happy about it. They want drinking water. They're happy that the governor took over and restored the drinking water. And they want a long-term solution because the next crisis is just right around the corner. Yeah. And I think that they realize that.
I think it's a very good point, whether you're white, black, or fuchsia color. It really doesn't matter. If you're living within the confines of the city limits of Jackson and you are a law-abiding citizen, you want to go to bed at night and understand that you're safe, bullets are not going to fly in, and you hear shots every night. You don't care if it's a judge who's elected or a judge who's appointed. You just want to take them off the streets.
Well, that's the goal, is public safety. And it comes to the point to where, whatever you got to do to make the streets safe, if we're going to drive to and from work up here, people are going to drive to and from the hospitals, to and from the law school, we're going to make it safe. And that's just the bottom line.
Some of those bills are working their way through now. They've either passed the House or Senate, and there's just so many different ones. Is there any that you want to talk about specifically that's on your mind as far as what will take care of the water situation in Jackson? There's one that, of course, the Capitol Police we just alluded to. There are numerous bills that are working through. Any specific to you?
Well, the one that came through the Senate was the Regional Utility Authority bill that Senator David Parker discussed and worked on, and that would bring a coalition of surrounding areas that wanted to join into a utility authority to kind of pool resources together and collaborate together. Now, I don't know if that's going to happen, or who exactly would want to belong to that, but that is out there. And
well, the other one was to actually take over the water system under when Hennepin finished. If he finishes in 2 years.
Well, I mean, that would actually do that.
That would do it?
That would actually do that as well.
Well, who would want to go into that other than Byram and Ridgeland?
Well,
and they probably wouldn't want to.
Those were the ones that were mentioned.
Okay.
So.
State senators also passed a bill Tuesday that would let mothers keep Medicare coverage for a year after giving birth up to from the current 2 months. Your thoughts on that one?
Well, when you look at the statistics from 21 I think 12 out of the 15 mothers that died in the state postpartum after 60 days were on Medicaid. So I don't know that that's the solution. I think that looking at federally qualified health centers that we have community-based mental health. People have talked about postpartum. We have a free clinic network. I think working with some of the community partners, getting the health department back to where it could take care of moms and babies like it did when I was growing up, in my opinion, is a better solution, because there's a shortage of doctors. People live a long way from OBGYNs, a long way from hospitals. But when you had a health department that functioned and took care of moms and babies that didn't have any other means back in the day, it actually worked. My sister-in-law retired from the health department.
What happened to them?
Well, basically, when Obamacare came through, the powers that be, and I don't know what powers that be, decided that the health department was no longer going to do this, and that they were going to shift the mission of the health department and move all this into primary care. And it just really didn't work well because there's just a shortage of doctors. The health department typically had a doctor that would come around to each health department on certain days, take care of the mothers, the babies. There were nurses there all the rest of the times. Even people with high risk, premature labor, they would give them the equipment to where they could go home, hook it up to their rotary dial phones so that they could send it over the telephone. People could monitor their contractions, make sure they were okay. I mean, we were like on telemedicine before there were telemedicine, honestly, with the health department many years ago. Yes.
Jeez.
And I think Dr. Edney is maybe looking at trying to get some of these functions back at the health department. Our challenge is to hire nurses.
Did the legislature stop their funding or decrease their funding? Well,
we shifted funding and kind of shifted the mission of the health department and took away these services that used to be at the health department for moms and babies. Now, they could still go and get vaccinations and things like that, but it used to be basically a primary care area.
Absolutely. You would go if you can't afford the doctor or any other doctor, you go to the health center and they would offer the same quality of care.
When you have something in place, why reinvent the wheel?
All right, let me ask you this. Is there any, and I'm just asking this, is there any competition between the local hospitals in these rural areas and the health center?
Not that I know of, because...
Now, did you hear Dr. Gross a few moments ago talking about their cons in Florida?
I was not able to hear him, but I knew what he was. I knew what he was talking about.
If there's a con bill, would you vote to do away with that?
I have filed bills to do away with all certificates of need since the day I got to the legislature, because people don't realize that you have to have an approval from the health department to even buy a piece of equipment like an MRI machine.
Why do we keep talking about this? I've been talking about this for 20 years at least.
Well,
maybe longer.
This is my 12th year, and I've been talking about it for that long. I think
why? Because of something called lobbyist.
Yes, that's a big part of it, and there's enough sick people in Mississippi to go around, trust me. There's enough sick people. Our problem now is nurses, because the price of nurses went up during COVID. Travel nurses, people that, didn't want to take the COVID shot, left the hospitals and found something else that they could do without having to take the shot. So all that contributed to the nursing shortage.
And at the same time, we understand they're trying to make it harder for nurses to get to students to get in school. I saw that story, and I'm wondering what the hell is that all about. But more with Angela Hill coming up in a moment or two, Senator from District 40, and some of her bills that are still alive when we return. Back with Angela Hill. There was one of the bills that you had, concealed carry license, 18-year-old with an instructor certification, that died in committee, but you had another bill, I think, did pass arming those in schools.
Yes.
Was that it?
We did pass from the calendar on the floor yesterday the Armed Educator Act, which is modeled after the Guardian program in Florida and Texas, and that would basically place the program under the Department of Homeland Security and under DPS to provide the training and certificates, and it would allow schools to choose whether or not they want to participate. It gives them the liability protections that the Church Protection Act and it's kind of modeled after that. So if a school wants to put together an armed educator team to work with law enforcement and to be trained to basically assist in a time of an active shooter or some unfortunate situation, the framework is now in place once we get this bill through the House.
If you're trying to check it, it's SB 2079. SB 2079. Walter Michel had a bill. I saw this yesterday to allow pet insurance in the state. I'd love to get him on and ask him about that one, to insure your pets. Is that medical and or life insurance, or do you
medical, as far as I know,
medical?
Because there's lots of states that have pet insurance. It's just basically that bill just basically recognized it as a legitimate entity in the state
Can
of
you
Mississippi.
sell it today? I mean, is it allowed to sell today?
It allows the regular insurers to sell it if they want to. So it's just basically opened up the market, a legitimate market in Mississippi for pet insurance.
Talk to me about the one of the things as far as electric vehicles, and you had a bill that I think is still alive as far as looking into the tax responsibility on the EVs.
And yes, it's Senate Bill 2020, and back some years ago, when Tate Reeves was lieutenant governor, we had a big omnibus bill that was sending money through a different channel back to the cities and counties for highways, roads, and bridges. And this electric vehicle tax, electric and hybrid tax, was tied up in that bill. So you kind of were held hostage. If you voted against it, you voted against sending money back to your cities and counties for roads and bridges. And if you voted for it, you voted for the hybrid vehicle tax. And which I don't have a problem with an electric vehicle tax, but this was not very well thought out, in my opinion, because people don't realize that this actually even taxes motorcycles. This was supposed to be to help with highway wear, bring money in where they're not collecting the gas tax, but it disproportionately affects hybrid motorcycles, low-speed electric vehicles. Basically, street-legal golf carts have this tax on them. They don't put any miles on the road. These are basically little recreational running around things. And if you look, the Motorcycle Industry Council actually saw my bill and contacted me and started explaining to me how this disproportionately affected electric and hybrid motorcycles and what the average amount of miles that somebody puts on the road with a hybrid or electric motorcycle or a low-speed golf cart, street-legal golf cart. So that's our issue with the bill, is that these people that just basically have these weekend toys, it disproportionately taxes them. And also, there's some vehicles on the road that are not hybrids that get just as good a fuel mileage as a hybrid. So some of my hybrid people who have hybrid vehicles have really been complaining about it because their vehicle doesn't get any different mileage than somebody that's a non-hybrid, but yet they're paying this tax, and it's tied to the CPI, so it keeps getting higher.
What's the status as far as the dealership in the Tesla bill, as they're calling it?
Well, it's still sitting on the calendar in the Senate, so that's really about all I know.
You know when it's going to come up again?
I don't.
We have a deadline? There is a deadline today.
The general bill and constitutional amendment deadline is today.
Yeah. Would that bill be one of the ones subjected to?
I believe it is subject to that deadline.
So if it doesn't come up today, then it's dead.
Right.
Is there a corresponding bill over in the House?
I think so. I think there is.
You had a Senate Bill 2041, which was deal with appropriations, rural fire truck fund for additional round of trucks. Yeah,
that's just the same bill that we file every year that authorizes the money for the rural fire truck grants that the rural fire trucks apply for. Same program that we've had for many, many years. That's just a bill that we have to enable that program.
One of Angela's passions, of course, is education, because she was in another life a school teacher. And any bills that you want to talk about that's affecting education? Oh, by the way, what do you think about giving $200,000 to any school that wants to switch to a full year? And why would they get $200,000? My understanding was, listening to some of the dissertations on the House and Senate, I think this came from the Senate, that even though, I think it was DeBar who said this, even those who have already switched, like Corinth and several others, they would get $250,000 grandfathered in.
Well, there's really not a lot of data out there that shows that a modified school calendar does any better academically, but I think the advantage of it is it gives teachers a break. If you've been in the classroom any time in the 20th century, you know that it's pretty stressful, and gets
it
more
also gives
stressful by the
parents
day.
and it gives students a break.
Yeah, it gives them a break, and it also allows parents to go on vacation with their kids, different times of the year where you don't have to pull them out in the fall. I always want to take my grandson on a vacation, in the fall to see the leaves and stuff, and he's always in school. And so I think that there's those advantages to it.
All right, let me push back a little bit on this one, because I've read more than one article that says there is research that says students students lose a lot of what they are taught in 3 long months during the summer.
Well, that's true. I think that you spend a lot of time at the beginning of school reviewing, and you do have some of that stuff that kind of gets cobwebs built up in it. So I think there is some legitimacy to that.
Well, then there would be a juxtaposition between those two thoughts and those two ideologies, that it either does or does it not. But I think if you went to this system, you would retain more. So therefore, the level of education would be a little bit better, wouldn't you think?
Well, I mean, I've looked at studies, and the studies are really not conclusive. But I think it's just a preference as to what the school district decides to do. And I think the money coming in is basically because if you do go more in the summer, you're going to pay more in electric bills and
well, I've heard
things
that,
like
but
that.
I don't understand that either, because our schools just shut down as far as no electricity at all.
No,
in
they
the summer?
just turn the thermostats up, and people aren't going in and out, closing doors and things like that. So you don't have the consumption that you would have. People aren't going in, flushing toilets, running water, and stuff like that. So your utility bills do go down when you're not in there.
All right. Any other education bills that you want to talk about? You had one as far as the superintendent's concerned?
Well, I always file a bill to try to reduce the salary of the superintendent. And we did pass one out of education. I don't remember if it was Dennis DeBar's bill. I think it was his bill that would reduce the superintendent's salary, but I think it actually raised the executive director of community college's salary, so it kind of looked like a wash to me. But that's one of the outrageous things that constituents look at, that we are basically the poorest state in the nation, and we spend one of the highest, 1 or 2 in the nation, on how much we spend on a state superintendent. And so, they want it to be more in line with what they think a superintendent, ought to make in a state like Mississippi. So that's something that I always file, because I think, honestly, $312,000 or $13,000 or that's a
But it's no longer tied. It's no longer tied to IHL, is it? Or it was at one time. Is it still tied to IHL? 90% of IHL?
I don't think it is anymore.
I don't either.
You're taxing my memory, but I know that we gave the authority for the board to set the salary years ago, and in thoughts that they would reduce it, but they never did. The state board.
Does that bill include IHL or just the state superintendent?
I think my bill. I've filed it both ways before, but I think this one probably just is the state superintendent, the one that you're talking about.
What do you think's coming up as far as on your list of we just got to have it passed this year?
I don't know. It's a crapshoot. I think that just not spending more money than we need to spend is what we need to focus on. But honestly, we have a good bit of deficit appropriations that we're spending money on right now. I got a text that said that this car bill is a House bill, so this dealership bill is a House bill, so it won't die today without action. I'm not on finance, so I wasn't sure if one came through the Senate or not.
Your appearances and visits are always enlightening and informative, and we thank you for taking the time to come in.
Well, I'm glad to be here. I will come anytime you'll have me.
Appreciate it. Angela Hill, Mississippi Senator District 40. We got more coming.